Hi, I'm Ashy, and today I'm continuing my series on birth month animals. So I just really wanted to come up with an idea that was birth month related but not birthstones, and I found this list of birth month animals, and I was really excited about that idea. So for this video, I'm doing the birth month animal of April, which is the dragon. And so this makes a perfect card for anybody who was born in April. It's very personalized, and I do 3 different styles to appeal to a lot of different audiences. The videos are sped up. They are not real-time videos, but the commentary is all real-time done while I was painting it. So even though the videos are sped up, you can really understand a lot of the techniques that I'm using for these paintings, and I go through every stage of it. I don't cut out any of the footage. I just speed it up so that the video is more consumable. Each of these took about an hour to paint, so that would be an extremely long video that's not very consumable for viewers. So I decided to speed it up, but keep that real-time commentary to make it a little bit easier on y'all. So you can follow along with these videos, paint your own versions and have a go at it, or you could also purchase these cards. They are available on my website if you don't feel like having a go at it yourself. So let's dive in and start painting.
So for my first dragon, I'm gonna do kind of this majestic dragon kind of flying through the sky. And so I'm gonna sketch it out first to make sure that it fits on the page. That's the number one reason I sketch, really. And so I'm going to start with the sweep of a tail, sweep it up this way, and then curve it around. And this is where the head will be. Okay, there's where the body and the head meet. And then where the body and the tail meet. Okay, this ridge along the kind of top of the tail and then top of the body of the dragon, I'm gonna do like little spikes coming off of. So that's why I defined where that line is really well. And then I'm gonna put in the wings. And so we're gonna start with this one on this front side. And I'm just gonna sweep that a curve up. And it kind of comes to a point here. And then I'm gonna make a little bit longer and then curve down this way toward the tail. And this one's gonna come up a little bit higher. Now that I got that bottom line in, I decided I want to make that a little bit wider. And then I'm just gonna put a curve here and bring that up around to a point. And then this is gonna kind of curve up toward the top here. And then gonna do another little curve and bring that around to a point. And then this one's gonna kind of curve up. And then a third curve right here. Maybe that's gonna curve around and then meet. And you wanna make this middle one a little bit longer. There we go. Erase that part in the middle. Smooth out this curve a little bit. A little bit shorter. That's the first wing. And then the second wing is gonna come off this way and it's gonna go off the page. So this angle is gonna be similar here and it's gonna come up like so. And then the back part is gonna come up like that. Okay, and then it sweeps. So this is the back. And then it sweeps down and around and curves up. So let's see if I can kind of mimic that over here. And get it to curve kind of up off the page. Okay, give this that little point there. And then I think it needs to look like it's bending over off to the side a little bit. So I'm gonna make this come this way and then this curve off instead. Because it should look like it's bending away from the body. And same here. Still give it that hint of a point here. Maybe just that first little scoop there. I think that works. Now for the legs, he's in flight, so the legs are gonna come off here and kind of just be trailing along behind. Okay. And then the second leg can kind of come off here. And then for the arm, I'm gonna give it like a little bump of a shoulder and then tiny little arms, kind of like T-Rex arms here. Okay, now for the second arm, you're not gonna see it, so I don't have to worry about that. And then define this shape a little bit further. And now for the head, we're gonna have kind of a beak-like head here. So it's gonna come down and then kind of come down at an angle to a point. Okay. And its eye will sit right here. It's gonna be kind of a diamond shaped eye. And then again, it's gonna have these like spikes coming off of its head and back. So I'm not gonna draw all those in, but just kind of get an idea of them. I think I wanna make the legs a little bit bigger just because they don't look like they could hold him. I'm gonna lighten up my drawing and then come to the painting part. Okay, now to paint my dragon, I'm gonna take a wash of yellow ochre to start off with. I'm kind of gonna clean up this section of my palette while I'm at it. Just mix all these colors in. Now just to take some yellow ochre and then add some more water to it. I'm just gonna get a nice light wash in first. And I'm using a nice big brush here. It comes to a good point though, so I can get into some of these small areas. So this is a size 14 round. And then I'm just using that paint, adding some water and spreading it out, trying to keep it wet as I go. So I'm pulling that kind of bead of paint with me as I'm moving up, and that helps to keep the transition smooth because that makes it, if I leave a bead of paint at the end, that makes it to where that end doesn't dry, and then I can meet back up with it and pull that paint down. And that prevents cauliflower edges, so to get a nice smooth wash even on kind of a complex shape. That's how you do it. I'm gonna go over the eye because the eye will be probably a golden color anyway, so it's okay if it is this yellow ochre. Okay, and take a little bit more and go over this back wing. And here, I'm assuming this edge has started to dry, so I'm just gonna be a little bit careful and kind of test it with not much paint. And actually, it was still wet. It's kind of cold in here today, so it's not drying very fast, which is nice. Now here, I kind of went over this little scoop area that I wanted to leave out. So I'll lift out some of that paint. It's not all gonna come up, but I can just lift out a little bit of it. And then when I go back in, I can define that edge again. So I'm just using a little bit of clean water and lifting out a little bit of the paint from the middle of the wing, just so that it gets a nice highlight in there, and that kind of will make the wing look a little bit more translucent, so you can kind of see the light shining through it. I also have a couple little fuzzies in here that I'm trying to get up, which works out fine because I'm lifting that area anyway. So use this time to pick up those two. Okay, now this is in like a damp phase, and I don't want to paint on that because I won't get nice soft blends, so I'm going to dry it. Okay, now I'm going to take a bit smaller brush, so this is a size 8 round, and I'm going to take some more yellow ochre, still lots of water. I don't want it to be really any darker than the first layer, but because I'm layering on top, it will get a little bit darker. And then I'm just going to reapply, and I'm going to do it in sections. So I'm going to start with this first wing, and that's because I want this layer to stay wet so that I can do some wet on wet blends with some nice deep red, and then it will be like a subtle transition from that deep red to the golden yellow ochre. So now that that is all wet up, I'm going to take some perline maroon with a little bit of water. It's thicker than the yellow ochre though, that I just put on, so that it won't bleed as much. Keep putting my arm in that blue paint. And then I'm just gonna drag that paint along the edges, and it's gonna bleed out a little bit. Okay. And then clean out the brush and drag a little bit of that back. Add just a little bit more water to get it to be a more subtle blend. Okay, and just a touch more up to this top edge. Really define this little swoop. There we go. And then just pull some of that color very, very slightly in lines toward the middle, so that it kind of looks like some veining or some like bones or something. But it's really, really subtle. Not very much at all. I'm gonna come back to this point here. There we go. And then this one is gonna come to the body. Add just a few more in. Okay, just, again, really, really subtle. Okay. Now, I'm pretty happy with that, except there's a little bit of a edge developing here that I don't want. So I'm just gonna take a clean brush and kind of blend that out, lift again. And so I'm gonna take a touch of yellow ochre and add that to the bottom edge here. Clean out the brush, add a touch of water to it, and let that blend out. And then I kind of like what that looks like, so I'm gonna do that around some of these areas just to define it a little bit more, give it a little bit more of that like golden color too. Okay, lift out a few spots again. Okay, now I'm going to do the same thing for the other wing after I tidy up this edge a little bit. Okay. Now I need to let that dry before I do the other wing because they're touching and I don't want it to blend into each other. Okay, same thing for the other wing, starting with yellow ochre, nice and light. Make sure it stays wet and add in that perline maroon along the edges. Lift out a little bit of the yellow ochre. And then add in just a hint of the veins. Okay, I'm just going to add a hint of green along the bottom here, and that'll create a shadow here. Okay. Now same thing, I'm going to let that dry and then work on the body. And here I am going to paint around the eye because I don't want the red to bleed into the eye. And just quickly move on to the red. Now I'm going to clean out my brush really well and dry it and then lift some highlights out. Okay. Now it looks pretty splotchy right now. That's okay. We can go in and edit it. So I'm just going to take a fairly dry brush and drag it along the edge of my red, and that will blend out and lift a little bit of that color so that it's a subtle transition. It also is creating a little bit of texture since my brush is fairly dry, but I'm pulling some of that color with it. Just creates some texture. Now I'm going to add my little spikes or horns or whatever you want to call them. Just get a little bit more water so they aren't too textured. Now along the back, I'm doing the little swoopy marks right along where I had put that ridge. And then same down the tail with the same little swoopy marks. A little bit more water so that they're slightly faded out here. And then here at the end, it has a little spiky end there. Okay. I'm pretty happy happy with that. Now I'm gonna add some details. So I'm gonna add some dark brown, which is just whatever here is left in my kind of brown well of my palette. I'm gonna add a little bit of indication of like claws. And this is really just using the very, very tip of my brush and doing like little dabs, nothing crazy. Okay, and then add that same color to create a shadow under the mouth and around the eye. Now I'm gonna take some concentrated yellow ochre and paint in the eye in that color, leaving a little bit of space to be a highlight. Okay, and back to a dark color here, so it's a little bit of indigo and a little bit of sepia, and that creates basically black, very thick. And I'm gonna create my pupil. So just a nice dark dot there with a little bit of a highlight. Okay, gonna let that dry now and then do just a little bit more definition on the eye. Same color, small amount of paint, and then just touch that in along the top lid to create a tiny bit more definition, and then a little bit more for the mouth. Okay, and then I just want to create some slight shadows here where the legs meet the body. So just using a more concentrated version of yellow ochre and adding in that little bit more shading. Like this back leg, I needed to separate it from the front leg. I'm gonna add a little bit more red to the front leg too. Okay, now I just want to add a little bit of texture. So I'm going to take a very, very pale wash of the yellow ochre and dry brush it over. So it's watered down in my palette, but then I kind of let it dry. So it's a very pale wash. And then just getting minimal water on my brush. And it creates that texture. Do the same thing in some of these red areas. Just tiniest amount, and that'll just make it look a little bit scalier. Now I'm going to take a little bit of mostly clean water and add it around my dragon, just a little bit. Just kind of start at the top and then add some yellow so that he looks like he's flying through a sunny area. And then it's got that nice like glow around him, but lots of water, so it's very subtle. Same under the wing. And as long as you don't scrub a bunch, it's not gonna disturb the paint that we put down on the dragon too much. It can reactivate it, but just don't put a ton of water right next to it. You can see if I do, it starts to bleed out. I'm okay with that a little bit, but I don't want it to do it a lot. Add in that yellow to give it that glow. See, like this, I'm okay with that bleed. I think it looks kind of cool, but if you aren't a fan of that, then just make sure you're a little bit more careful around the dragon and make sure that you're not using as much water. I'm using a lot of water. I'm like puddling it on there. You can also make sure that your dragon is a little bit drier before you add it. So even just letting it sit for 10 extra minutes will help prevent that, because the paint will be more kind of set. It will still reactivate, but it doesn't reactivate as easily the longer it's set. So there's the nice glow. Okay, and then I'm gonna splatter in some of the yellow. Okay, and then also some of the yellow ochre. And a touch of the red as well. And that's all gonna bleed out because it's wet on wet splatters there. Now I just need to let it dry and then sign it. I want to add just a little bit more splattering that will kind of stay splattered instead of blending it all out. Blend out some of it, but not all of it, just to get a little bit more texture. All right, so my second one is going to be a dragon amongst like a hill of flowers. So I'm just gonna start by sketching in my dragon shape again, just like I did last time. And the dragon's gonna be looking down towards the flowers. So I'm just gonna kind of sketch in an oval for the head to start with, and then get in the neck. It's gonna kind of swoop down like this, and then swoop out, and then here's where the back of the dragon is. Get the front of the neck in and the chest, and then its back leg is going to be here, and then it's going to kind of be sitting on a rock here, so you can't see its back leg. I got to decide if I want the tail coming out in front or behind, which I'll decide later. And then here is going to be a hill, and this is where the flowers are going to be growing out of. Now its wing is going to kind of come off from right here and sweep down and then sweep up. So his wings are tucked in, and then they come up to a point here, put a curve in here, and then they're going to come off that way. Okay, and then the wing is going to have just a little bit of a size to it there, and then come off this way and come out the back. So now everything kind of in the middle that's covered by this wing, I'm gonna erase and see if I'm happy with that shape or not. Edit it just a little bit. Now for the other side, it's gonna come off this way, and we're gonna see this inside part on the other side. Okay. And then it's gonna curve around and sweep up again, like this one. Give it a little bit of a curve here, and then sweep off the page like that one. And then a front arm kind of coming down here, but it's gonna be hidden by the wings a bit. Now I could make this tail come around in front, like that. Okay, so the camera cut out and I didn't realize it. Basically, I just finished off the head and some details. So just to go over kind of what I did here, I got in the jaw shape and then the bottom part of the jaw or mouth. And then for the top, I want these little like spikes. So I do a curved line and then do a U shape and go straight up to the next curve and then do a U shape, and that helps those curved spikes to have a nice flow to them. And then as we come down the back, they're gonna get shallower. For the facial features, I just did like a little curve for the nostril and then a diamond for the eye for right now. And then I wanted to put like one more little spike thing where the ear would be, just to make it not so empty right there. I'm just going to take kind of a medium-sized brush here. This is a size 8 round, and get some yellow ochre and water it down. I turned around my palette because today, for some reason, I don't normally, but today I kept sticking my arm in my Prussian blue, and actually some of the chunks of it were sticking to me and coming out of my palette. So that was starting to annoy me. So I went ahead and turned my palette around so that I don't put my arm in that specific well. So I'm going to start with just a wash of yellow ochre over my whole dragon here. And I'm not too worried about the back part because like those spikes, those are going to be red. So I don't really need them to have the yellow ochre on them right now. And I'm just going over the eye because that is going to be a golden color anyway. So it's okay if it's got a little bit of yellow ochre on it. These spikes on the head, I'm going ahead and painting in just because they're bigger. So it's not really hard to do that. Okay, and then I'm just going to let that dry completely before I start on my next layer. So now I'm going to do this section of the wing here that's in the back. So I'm going to get this section wet, going around the arms. So we're negative painting basically with water for this section. And then I'm going to take my maroon and get it in along the top edge, add some more darkness there, And since behind it is dry, it's only gonna bleed down into this part of the wing, and it's only gonna bleed down to where this arm is. It's not gonna go farther than that because that's where I put the water. So it's gonna stop right where the water stops. Now I still want to lift a little bit so that there is a little translucence. Now I'm gonna dry that. I decided I'm gonna do just a touch more of the maroon along the top edge here. A little bit of water, dry off, and blend that out just a tad. I just wanted that stronger color on the top so that it's a little bit more subtle of a transition there toward this side of the wing. And do the same thing with adding plain water to the head. And I am going to paint around the eye here this time because I don't want that to turn red. And sometimes painting with clean water, it's hard to see where it is. So if you kind of look at it from an angle, you can see it's shiny, whereas the dry parts are matte. So that's how you know that you have the water on there. Coming all the way down into the arms, but stopping at this wing. Make sure it's all wet still. Don't want any spots to have dried. And then I can take in my maroon and start to drop that in. And then I'm just kind of pulling out some of these areas. I put water for these little spikes and some I didn't. So where I didn't, or where it's not bleeding out, but I want a spike, I'm just adding a little flick there. So I'm going to take a little bit of more concentrated paint and add some more to the little spikes, pulling some spikes up off the back. Make this one come out a little bit more. Edit the shape of the nose just a little bit. Add in a little bit more red into the cheek. Okay, now rinse, dry a little bit, and then blend out that edge some. Get it into the shape that I want that transition to be. So don't add too much water, just a touch. Okay, so like here, this is bleeding too much, so I'm just gonna take my brush, clean, dry, and lift it out. Just kind of edit the shape of that bleeding. Just gonna blend out. Now I'm gonna add just a little bit of that color behind the jawline, a little bit more yellow ochre as well, just to create kind of a shadow separation there. And then I'm gonna blend that yellow ochre down a little bit. And if it's not perfectly smooth, that's okay, because I'm gonna go and add some texture after anyway. I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow ochre shadow here onto the belly, kind of between the arms, and that will make it have that definition of where this arm in the back is coming out. And a little shadow to the back arm itself, and just a little bit here as well. So now I'm gonna do the same thing for the tail and back leg. So just taking clean water and going carefully along the edge of my wing here. Just adding a little bit of a shadow there on the leg under the wing. There we go. Now I was just letting this back part dry a little bit before I'm gonna turn and go in and add those little spiky things off the tail. Okay. Now I'm gonna clean out my brush, dry it off a bit so I'm not introducing a bunch of water, and then just touch the edge of those spikes to blend them out a little bit. So since that's still wet, that paint will bleed out easily. And then I'm just gonna lift out a little bit again, just to give it a bit of a highlight. Now I'm gonna dry it and then work on this front wing. Okay, same technique. Now I'm gonna create the face. So I'm gonna take some yellow ochre and put that in for the eye, leaving just a little bit of white space there. And then I'm gonna let that dry before I do the dark pupil. I'm gonna put in some dark here for the mouth. So using just the very tip of my brush here. And then for the nostril, make it just a little bit darker. Okay, so now for the background, I'm gonna get some clean water and get in the like grassy hill here. So I'm just gonna go kind of along the top edge and just add clean water to start with. Now, if some of this bleeds into the tail here, I'm not worried about it because that can have a little bit of kind of foliage going over it. Same with over this foot. So I'm going to take a little bit of pink and start dabbing that in, just kind of dropping it in places, and it's going to explode, and that's okay. And then I'm going to start taking some greens. So I'm going to take sap green here, and it's mixed with some like just other greens on the palette. I'm going to get just a little bit of my red to tone it down a little bit, and I'm gonna start dropping that in as well, just kind of randomly around. And then some of it's gonna blend with the pink. I'm just super not worried about it at this point. And it's gonna be nice and pale, so nothing that can't be gone over later. I'm gonna add in some olive green just to get some variety in some of these areas. Now I'm gonna take a clean water in my brush and drop it into some areas to really just repel that paint. And that's where I will add in the daisies, which are gonna be white flowers, right? So I can create little cauliflowers on purpose where I'm gonna put some white flowers. I'm gonna splatter in some green as well, just to create even more texture. Get it a little bit thicker so that it doesn't bleed out quite as much. And then I'm just gonna kind of dab it off of the areas that I don't want it. If you want to, you can always protect that with like a sheet of paper or a towel or something. Now down here, it's kind of puddling, so I'm just gonna take my towel and dab it up around that bottom edge so that it doesn't create too much of a puddle. Now I'm gonna take even a little bit more clean water and push away some more of that pigment in different areas, and it's just gonna be super textured. Dropping in some darker color in some of these areas where I want there to be a little bit more shadow. So that's just got a little bit more red mixed in. And anywhere that you want to have a little bit more white space, you can lift out as well as, so I just like dropped in some water, right? So drop in some water, let it sit for a second, and then dry the brush, and you can pull out even a little bit more color there. Or you can dab it out with the towel too. That's always an option. Okay, so just a variety of options there for creating those little white spaces. I'm gonna add a little more pink to some of these areas. Okay. Maybe even splatter a little bit of the pink. Okay, there we go. Now I'm gonna let that dry, and then I can work on some details for the florals. Now that that's dry, I'm gonna take a smaller brush. This is a size 8 round, and I'm gonna do some of the details. So I'm gonna get a little bit more pink mixed with a little bit of green just to tone it down. And then I'm just gonna create sweet pea flowers. So they're pretty loose. I'm just kind of doing some downward facing strokes. And I'm not really worried about making them super realistic or anything. And then just some little subtle ones just to layer it a little bit in some areas. Now for these back ones, I do want to add just a hint more, but I don't want it to be crazy. So it's very light wash of paint so that it's not super obvious and detailed. I'm even going to dab some of it out. It's just texture basically. And then I'll go in and add some stems in a little bit. Now for the daisies, I'm going to take just a little bit of my like yellow ochre, lemon yellow here, just a super, super light wash, okay? And then I'm just going to add that in just in a variety of places. Again, the ones that are kind of farther back on the hill are going to have less detail, be even lighter. And then some down here will have a little bit more. Now I'm gonna take some dark color and some yellow ochre mixed together for the centers here of the daisies. Give it just a little bit. And then we're gonna add some stems now. So sap green mixed with a little bit of pink, a little bit of olive green, whatever's left on my palette. And then I'm just gonna do some stems. And sweet pea stems are kind of swirly, and they have some little curly cues coming off. And then for the daisies, I'm gonna just add in some leaves as well. And the flowers, you can't even really hardly see them, but having the stem going to them and then the leaves kind of gives it a little bit better like illusion of those flowers. Just a little bit more contrast into these leaves here by adding some more pure sap green just to bring a little bit more, and then lighten it back up. Lots of water here, and add in the little stems over here. Splatter a little bit bigger splatters. That just adds a little bit more texture. Then for these back ones, I still want to add just the hint of some, but I don't want a lot, so I'll probably dab out some of this color too. And just basically just dotting it in. Okay, adding a variety of little marks into these areas. I'm gonna add just a little bit more texture and like intentional marks here. Darken this up a little bit. Some more splatter. Just kind of brighten up these ones that are over the leg a little bit because they're blending in just a little more than I want them to. Okay, all right, now I'm gonna add some more texture here. So I'm gonna take some olive green, dry off my brush, and then do some dry brushing just to create some like grassy texture. Okay, now I'm going to take a little bit of clean water and come up around the dragon, just kind of touching it in between. It's going to bleed a little bit. I'm okay. I'm okay with that, bleeding just a tad. And just kind of throw some water in there. It's not super precise. Get some yellow, loosen it up, and just kind of tap that in around to get a glow around the dragon. Splatter a little bit of pink as well, just cause I feel like it. I don't really know why, don't have a reason. Okay, that just kind of warms up the background, sets it off a little bit, I guess. Need a little bit down here too. And then just a bit more dry brushing through the grasses. Okay, I just want to do a touch more brown into the nostril. I feel like it's a little too purpley almost, like bluish. And then just a slight shadow under the mouth. And I'm just kind of defining the eye here a little bit more. I feel like it was almost like just blobbed on there, like it wasn't incorporated very well, I felt like. So I'm just adding some darker reds and kind of dry brushing, adding more texture, and hopefully making that eye feel more incorporated. Okay, so now it looks like it's kind of set in instead of plopped on. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of how I feel about it. So I am happy with that. Now I'm just gonna sign it in some green. Okay, and it's done. So to start off for the cartoony version of the dragon, I'm going to draw in the shape first. So just to get the placement, we're gonna start with the head, just a circle basically. And then down from the head, we have the neck, the chest, the tail will sweep out this way. Then we'll have the wing coming off here, which I'll detail in later, but generally it'll be there. And then we'll have the other wing peeking up over the shoulder on this side, okay? I can know that it's gonna fit on the page how I want, and now I can start refining those shapes more. So for the head, just gonna work on getting that shape defined in, the chin to be right here, and then we'll kind of come down from this edge of the face for the chest, and then for the back, same idea. Okay, here's going to be a back leg. So kind of like a C shape, and then the foot will come out this way. Okay. And then for the front leg, I'm gonna kind of draw from back here where the shoulder would be, sort of, and then bring that down at an angle here. Okay. And then the other leg will be back behind. Now to define the wings, I think I want them just a little bit higher here. And so I'm just gonna tuck it in here. I want it to sweep up that way and then curve down to this end. And then we're gonna have little swoops. And then the other one is just going to be this top point basically that we're seeing. Now for the face, I'm gonna define these facial features a little bit now. So we're gonna have a mouth here, nice grin, and then the nose will just be kind of these two like nostrils with this little curve over them for the little snout, and then the eyes are gonna be like half circles, and then I'm just kind of sketching in eyelashes here because that'll kind of define where my top eyelid is. Okay, there we go. In terms of how our dragon's gonna be embellished, it's gonna have little like spikes off the head, and then off the back there's gonna be spikes as well, which I'll mostly just do with the paintbrush when I get there. So that is the dragon drawing. Now I'm gonna take my kneaded eraser and roll it over the whole thing to lighten up the drawing. Okay, so now we're on to painting the dragon, and I'm gonna do it in like reds and golds, just like my other ones. So I'm just gonna kind of mix together these yellows that are on my palette, and I'll kind of clean up the palette well as well while I'm at it. And then I'm gonna add a little bit more of my lemon yellow deep to make it a little bit more of that bright yellow. So I'm gonna start with a wash of this yellow over the whole body of the dragon. Okay, now I'm gonna take some of my red here. Make sure it's not too much water on my brush, so I'm just dabbing off any excess water and then dragging that along the back of the dragon and letting that bleed out. And then if you want it to like feather out like this, you can tap along, because wherever you pick up your brush, it's gonna do that. If you drag, it doesn't really do that. But I don't know. I haven't decided if I'm gonna leave it like that. I'm gonna clean it up just a little bit by dragging a damp brush along the edge. So I'm actually drying my brush off basically, and then just lifting that color, moving it around. Okay, add just a little bit more of the yellow along that edge. And then I'm just kind of pushing the red back away from the chest area because I want that to actually be more of the golden color. So as long as it's still wet and it's not a super staining color, you can edit the shapes a little bit. Now I can add a wash of color onto this wing because it's just barely touching that red, so I'm not worried about it bleeding in. And this brush is a size 16 round, so it is pretty large, but it comes to a good point, so I can get into these areas pretty easily, even though it's a very large brush. And then same thing with just adding a touch of red to the edges here. Okay, now I'm just going to take a little bit of that color and drag it up to get some like veining, and it's very, very subtle because I'm using very little paint and a very, very light touch, and because I'm doing it onto damp paper, all of that makes it keep this little subtle veining. Now, kind of the same idea for the other wing that's just peeking out. Add in my yellow. And then I'm just going to take a very small amount of purple to add in for a shadow. So purple is the contrasting color for yellow, so adding that in to the yellow makes a brownish color for a shadow. So just kind of dulls it down and makes it less vibrant. Okay. Now for the face, I'm going to do the same thing, same idea. So I'm going to take my yellow, and I can go over the mouth because the mouth is going to be dark basically, but I need to leave the eyes unpainted. And then I'm going to take my red and do that along his head, and that color is going to come down toward the snout here. Just lifting again to refine the bleeds a little bit, kind of refine where I want that red coming down to the snout. Now I'm going to make some of the spiky shapes on top here, and I don't have much water at all on my brush here, so it's creating a dry brush effect, which I like, so I'm going to continue that. Okay, I want to go up a little bit higher on some of these. Got a little mohawk going on, and then I'm going to do the same thing for on the back, and it's going to go in between the wings, so I'm not going to do it over that wing. Okay, turning the painting so that my angle can be a little bit easier to manage. And then on the end of the tail, it's going to kind of have the little things coming out in multiple directions. Just a touch more water. Okay. Now I'm going to take a smaller brush because I want a little bit more control in terms of how much water I'm adding. And I'm just going to take a little bit of water and drag it along that edge to bleed out slightly where those marks are meeting the tail. Okay. Now I'm going to add some shadow to this back leg here. So I'm just going to color it in basically with my yellow. This is a little bit stronger of a color, and then I'm going to take some of my purple and tap it in. And also use a little bit of yellow ochre, which is basically just yellow and purple. Like, that's, if you were going to make yellow ochre, that's what you would do. It's just mix yellow and purple. So it's a nice shadow yellow color. Sometimes it's just a little bit too vivid still, so add a little bit more purple to it. Now I'm going to add some shadow under the chin area. I'm going to avoid this belly area right now because the leg is drying. So let me do the chin. So there's going to be a cast shadow from the head. Though adding this shadow also defines the shape of the chin because the chin is going to stay light. So that'll define it. Now I'm going to work on this like shoulder area. So I'm just going to add some clean water following the curve that I had drawn. So I'm leaving the chest unpainted or dry here, and the belly area. And I'm going to add a little bit more yellow ochre here because I want this to be a more like orangey golden yellow. And then a little bit more of the red. Okay, now I'm gonna work a little bit on the head. So I'm gonna add a little bit more of the yellow ochre just to warm it up a little bit. Okay, and then just a little bit of shadow on the side of the face. And just a slight shadow around this eye as well. Okay, now I need that to dry, and then I'll do the shadows on the belly area. So I'm gonna add a little bit of yellow ochre and then a little bit of purple. Clean off my brush and then blend out that edge. Slight shadows on the fronts of these legs. Now I'm going to add some texture, so I'm going to take some yellow ochre mixed with a little bit of the yellows that are left on my palette. Make sure there's not a lot of water on my brush, and then just dry brush. So I'm holding my brush very parallel to the paper and very lightly dragging the brush across the page. And since it's a similar color to what's underneath, it's not going to show up much, but it's just going to add that texture to make it look kind of scaly. So this wing, I'm going to add a highlight in the middle because I'm not super happy with how this shadow turned out. So I'm just going to lift some of that color out and make it more highlighted, like maybe there's some light shining through it from somewhere, because the wings are more transparent in my imaginary animal than the rest of them. I'm going to get some purple here for the eyes, and I'm going to start with just adding the iris. So I'm just sketching out a half circle here, and I'm just going to dot it in because I want to have some white space for highlights. And then same thing on the other side. I'm going to do the nostrils, so I'm just going to create a nice dark mix with some sepia and some Payne's Gray. Tap off extra because that's very woken up in my palette. And this is literally just going to be like little ovals. Same color for the mouth, except where the tongue is. So I'm going to use negative painting here to make a tongue. Now I'm going to dry this again. Now let me add in the pink for the tongue. I'm going to use a little bit of permanent rose mixed with the red that I was using, which is the Perylene Maroon, just to get some continuity of the colors, but I don't want it to be too red. And then I'm going to paint that in for the tongue. Then I'm going to use a slightly darker version of that, kind of around for some lips. I don't know. Okay, I'm not a fan of those lips, so I'm just gonna add the dark back in over it. There we go. Okay, now for the eyes, I'm gonna add in the eyelashes here. Okay, and then just a little rim around the bottom edge. Okay, same color for the pupil, which again, I'm just gonna kind of dot in because I want to maintain a highlight. There we go. Take a little bit of the red, I think, to help define the top of the snout and bring it up into the top of the head, using dry brushing here to add some texture while I'm at it. Let's see if I can lighten up the mouth a little bit. It's just too dark. It's taking a little bit too much of the focus. So I'm just adding some water to it, and then I'm going to dab it with my towel to lift up some of the color. Okay. And I'm just going to take a little bit more of that dark color to add another layer to the eyelashes. They kind of, watercolor dries lighter, so it kind of fades out a little bit. So adding layers is how you really build up the depth. Curl them back a little bit more. Okay, now I need to add some claws. So I'm going to take that same dark color, make sure I don't have a ton of water on my brush. These are going to be small. I'm going to add one at the back of each foot and then a few coming off the front, and it doesn't have to be like super precisely located because I didn't draw like toes or anything, but just add a couple marks. Now I'm going to add the hint of a back foot in here. Okay, add some purple to it, dry it, tiny bit more yellow ochre. Now I'm going to go ahead and add some clean water to the bottom, cleanish water. And then some red splatters. So now I'm just taking a little bit of whatever random dark mixtures are in my palette, like the sludgy stuff, to add just a little bit of shadow. Okay, and then just to go back in and redefine some of these claws, since now I kind of painted over them, right? And it kind of made them bleed a little bit. Okay, so final dry, and sign it.
Thank you so much for watching today. I really hope you enjoyed it. And just remember that these cards are available for sale on my website if you don't feel like having a go at it yourself. Have an awesome day.